All right, good morning, everyone. Okay, we're going to be in the Old Testament again. The Lord led me here, and so we're going to be talking about Uzziah and his ventures in this world. We're going to start with the 26th chapter of 2nd Chronicles. And we're going to read through that. We're going to learn about Uzziah. And so all the people of Judah had crowned Amaziah's 16-year-old son, Uzziah, as king of the place of his in place of his father. And after his father's death, Uzziah rebuilt the town of Elath and restored it to Judah. Uzziah was 16 years old when he became a king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 52 years. His mother was Jechaliah, and she was from Jerusalem. He did what was pleasing in the Lord's sight, just as his father, Amaziah, had done. Uzziah sought God during the days of Zechariah, who taught him to fear God. And as long as the king sought guidance from the Lord, God gave him success. Uzziah declared war on the Philistines, and he broke down the walls of Gath, Jabneth, and Ashdod. And he built new towns in Ashdod area, in other parts of Philistine. That's where the Philistines lived. God helped him in the wars against the Philistines, in his battles against the Arabs of Gur. That's actually Gur-Baal. And his wars with the Meunites. And the Meunites paid annual tribute to him. He not only won against them, but then we got money coming in to the coffers. And his fame spread even to Egypt, where he had become very powerful. Uzziah built fortified towers in Jerusalem, and at the corner gate, and at the valley gate, and at the angle of the wall. And he also constructed forts in the wilderness and dug many water cisterns, because he kept great herds of livestock in the foothills of Judah and on the plains. He was also a man who loved the soil, and he had many workers who cared for the farms and the vineyards, both on the hillsides and in the fertile valleys. Uzziah had an army of well-trained warriors ready to march into battle, unit by unit, and this army had been mustered and organized by Jaleel, and he was the secretary of the army, and his assistant, Maaseiah. They were under the direction of Hananiah, one of the king's officials. You see, these regiments were mighty warriors, and they were commanded by 2,600 clan leaders. The army consisted of about 300,000, 7,500 men, all elite troops, and they were prepared to assist the king against any enemy. Uzziah provided the entire army with shields, spears, helmets, coats of mail, bows, and sling stones. And he built structures on the walls of Jerusalem, designed the experts to protect those who shot arrows, hurled large stones from the towers and the corners of the wall. His fame spread far and wide, for the Lord gave him marvelous help, and he became very powerful. But when he had become powerful, he also became proud, which led to his downfall. And he sinned against the Lord, his God, by entering the sanctuary of the Lord's temple and personally burning incense on the incense altar. Azariah, the high priest, went in after him with 80 other priests of the Lord. That's quite a band of people. I remember when I first read that, I thought I read it wrong because 8, and that's a good number, coming in with 8 other people. But he come in with a pretty good crowd. And it says they were all brave men. And they confronted the king and said, "It is not for you, Uzziah, to burn incense to the Lord. That is the work of the priest alone, the descendants of Aaron, who are set apart for this work. So you need to get out of this sanctuary, for you have sinned. The Lord God will not honor you for this." And Uzziah was holding an incense burner. He became furious. But as he was standing there, raging at the priests before the incense altar in the Lord's temple, leprosy suddenly broke out on his forehead. When Azariah the high priest and all the other priests saw the leprosy, they rushed him out. And the king himself was eager to get out because the Lord had struck him. And so King Uzziah had leprosy until the day he died. He lived in isolation in a separate house, for he was excluded from the temple of the Lord. His son Jotham was put in charge of the royal palace, and he governed the people of the land. And the rest of the events of Uzziah's reign from beginning to end are recorded by the prophet Isaiah, the son of Amoz. When Uzziah died, he was buried with his ancestors. His grave was in a nearby burial field belonging to the kings, for the people said he had leprosy, and his son Jotham became the next king. Good old Uzziah. So that I kind of title this message that we don't want to get satisfied in this world. Satisfaction will breed our destruction and our downfall. Let's talk about Uzziah just for a little bit here. You see, his reign marked the height of Judah's in the eyes of God, and as far as where they were going to go. That was the height. He fought successfully against other nations, even exacted tribute from the Ammonites. Judah expanded westward with settlements even in Philistine. It's probably unheard of in that day to even go into that area. It wasn't your land. But that's just how powerful he became. Right? He had the Lord's hand upon him. And during Uzziah's period of reign, the nation prospered. And even the desert areas, we read, were reclaimed by water conservation. He built those aqueducts. Consequently, he didn't steal it, but the Romans did that as well. They utilized that as well. And so he took a page out of their book, so to speak. But we read in verse 8 that he became very powerful. There's a saying, I'm sure you've heard it, that absolute power corrupts absolute. It's not scriptural, obviously, but it does have some meat to it, right? It will corrupt you because man is fallen.
And Uzziah thought he could go into this is actually a question. Where he came from, what we read in the text, is that he sought God during the days of Zechariah, who instructed him in fear of God. So what we see here is a man that forgot his fear, that he's going to take up the incense and go running in to the Holy of Holies. Well, it's not the holiest of holies, but where he's not supposed to go. Only the priests of Aaron's lineage were allowed in this house, at the altar. And so, we find that Uzziah even shortened his life. He shortened his lifespan. He lived just over 50 years. I'm sure God had more for him. But sin has repercussions, right? So let's talk about there's different types of conflict that we have, right? And strife. And how we react to it is always the battle of the mind. And I'm sure Uzziah, at some point in time, when the devil come talking, because that's who led him astray, this sin started creeping in. And I wonder if some of that was direct sin that he did, what we've seen in the end, but we don't get to read about maybe some of the indirect sin that he started allowing into his kingdom. Because we read early on in his life what he's doing to get the blessings of God. But you don't just go from that. The devil doesn't just take you straight from that to going right into out and out sin, to dying a death that he died of leprosy. There had to be a breakdown. And a lot of that is called subtle disobedience that we can allow even into our life. And it all comes down to is if you forget your first love. Now, I can talk personally about that. And I can tell you, I have done Uzziah. And I guess we all could probably say, hey, there's some times that I got a little bit proud. That I let some things go to my head. That I got complacent. But it's all about your first love that's going to keep you on the up and up and keep you where you need to be. And so let's talk about a little bit about the cross. A lot of people, even outside of this church, they understand the cross. They understand that Jesus died on the cross. And they understand that his blood was shed on the cross. And they understand a lot of what that's all about, salvation. Okay? But understanding it and having it being personal are two different things. And let me give you personal. Okay, let me show you personal. Okay, so pick out a loved one that you are really close to. Okay? And then I want you to picture that loved one being brought in here and they're going to get nailed on the cross. And they're going to get beat before they get nailed on the cross. And they're going to put them out here right up on the hill up here. How racked with pain are you going to be trying to figure this out? Oh, God. Right? Think of it. Think about one of your children. That happening to them. Would that get personal at that moment? I would say that gets real personal. A sword piercing their side to drain out the last part of their blood that they have in their body. That myself, I don't know how Jesus' mother did that, right? I don't know how Mary did that. I don't know how but she stayed there. And so, what I'm talking to you about is making Jesus and his death that personal. That personal into your and applying it into your life to where that's you know, the fear of God is not the fear of the wrath of God. The fear of God is the fear of not having God. That's a lot of that. The world gets that turned around. I had that turned around when I first come into the church. When they would say, well, you need to fear God. It was abstract to me. I was trying to figure this out. What do you mean? Aren't I supposed to go to the Lord? When I make a mistake, aren't I supposed to, fall on my knees and go to Him? Right? And so I didn't understand what fear was all about. But we see it in Uzziah. We see it exactly in him. This man was one of the most powerful leaders of Judah. Now, he wasn't like Saul, or was he like David? They're all to themselves. But if you remember correctly, God didn't even want to give him a king. And so now that they have these reign of kings, in comes the trouble of corruption. Because God's uncorruptible. Right? And so what we see is though we get to kind of look at their lives and apply it to ourselves. We get to kind of and it's not just Uzziah. We can look through all the kings that are written about and what they did wrong and what they did right. And we can kind of, because guess what? Our own little personal lives, we're the kings of over whatever it is that God has given us. Right? We take ownership over that. All right? Now, let's talk about some things that the subtle disobediences. Does anybody here have a life outside of this church? Or do you just spend the whole time in here in prayer and fasting and, reading the Word? All right? And our normal, everyday rituals. Everybody has them. Raise your hands for coffee. Right? Talking to you. Okay? So we have our rituals in our lives. Okay? And then then it just seems like things snowball from there. And we have kids and their needs. And then we have our other family members. I have a needy mom. You have a needy mom out there? It's okay that I have one. I don't complain because I love her very much. She's the only one I got. But she hath needs. And, I do my best. But I find in my life, when I get tripped up, now watch this. My biggest trip up in my life that I can look back and see, and what we can look back and see with Uzziah, he has some trip ups, right? And maybe you can look back into your life and see some trip ups yourself. But whenever I go from one place to the other, I get transplanted with the army, or I have moved from this situation and God has moved me. The devil always is in those details. He wants to try and manipulate my mind. And one of the best things that I did whenever I went to El Paso is I really started a prayer and kept my prayer ritual of praying every morning. And let me tell you, Brother Gary, that was probably one of the greatest things that kept me while I was there, because there was so many things trying to come at me and pull me down. Away from home, right? Devil chirping in your ear. Oh, you can do this. Oh, you can do that. Who's going to know? Right? But then I moved back to this land. Right? I moved back here, back home. And what had happened was, Brandon, I allowed some sin in my life. Because I let my guard down. Oh, I'm back home. Allowed some sin to come back in. And guess what, Brother Bernie? I was smoked for that. And I know I was. And I'm still kind of going through it right now. Why? Because God didn't give me these children, these little boys, for me to destroy them. Me to allow sin in my life that's going to ultimately destroy them. And so there's consequences for our actions. But I've learned where I need to look out around the corner for when Satan is going to strike me. And it's going to be in my time where I let my guard down and I become complacent. Every single time. Maybe you could identify with something I'm talking about here. And I know Uzziah he's probably nodding his head right now. Because there's direct disobedience and there's indirect disobedience. But either way, if we keep that cross personal, if we keep it personal, what Jesus did for us, and we put it in our mind about those beatings he took, listen, that was nasty business. And those Roman soldiers, they were just playing around. They knew how to run a whip. And this wasn't the first man they'd ever beat. And they were putting it to him. They didn't care. It was just business. We have to keep his death personal, very personal. We have to see that blood. We have to understand that this was a lot of pain. I can't imagine. You know, I've gotten thorns in my hands. Growing up as a kid, our only heat was actually wood heat. Raised on a farm, and I hated thorn trees. That's excellent burning wood. I didn't know how excellent it was. I didn't think it was very excellent because it always meant I was going to get stuck somewhere, somehow. And the ones that are fresher have that red tint to them. Let me tell you something. It's like a viper bite. It's going to come back and sting on you. It's like getting horned from a catfish. Anybody been horned from a catfish? The smallest ones will get you, not the big boys. It's that little one that wiggles out and gets you. And man, does it burn. So, where I was going with that. Talking about catfish and thorns. Thank you. And he did. And they just crushed that down on his head. Do you think they just laid that on his head, his brow? No. No, it was all about, let's get it under the skin. I guarantee you they couldn't go get a thorn limb that was dead and bend it into the... And so we're dealing with the thorns that are fresh and nice, and they're limber. They'll move. They'll kind of contour to the skull. They'll go right into that skin and contour. And he did that for you. At any time, it said, I've had enough. And so if we keep that, if we keep our focus, and here's another thing that we can do, not just keeping our focus, but we can try to please God. I've been going through this, and it was very hard. I've been going through this long COVID, and it's still hitting me. It hit me last night with my eyes. The last 2 or 3 days, it's been trying to take out my kidneys. And it's been a battle. And one of the things that I told that the Lord had impressed upon me to do, and I just was stubborn. Anybody ever been stubborn when God tells you to do something? I was stubborn. And because it was really going to be a big step. And that was a 3-day fast. And I'm not tooting my horn, but I did that for the Lord because I wanted, and whenever I ended that fast, I asked the Lord that he would be pleased with it. I wanted him to have pleasure in that sacrifice. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, if your focus is on pleasing him, that's one of the best places you're going to be in God, in your relationship with Jesus Christ. If it's about pleasing God, you see, oftentimes our prayers get too inward and they're not outward enough. And, I've been asking God, because the Lord gave me this word about, from Genesis, the pastor said, I don't know who this is for. This happened about a month ago or so. The Lord had given him this word, right? And it's Genesis 15. He says, I am with you. Will watch over you wherever you go. I will bring you back to this land. And I will not leave you until I have done all that I have promised. You see, as soon as he said that from right here, he said, it was right here. He didn't know. But that immediately spoke to me because I had just been brought back to this land. And I now had been fighting COVID since about August 15th, or actually long COVID. COVID was a piece of cake. This long COVID, let me tell you something. This is designed, and this is Satan in himself. All right, this is to destroy people. All right, I'm not going to go through all of that, but what I am going to say is that having brain fog is excruciating. You forget your train of thought all the time. I don't know how many times Carlita's coming behind me and I didn't finish this or finish that. And that's just not me. I hate leaving stuff unfinished. I've got rock in front of my house, right, that is unfinished. I've got to do the landscaping, right? And I can't do it because my body won't let me move that rock. I want to get it and get it out of the driveway. It's sitting on a tarp. And the neighbors are probably all like, what's this guy doing? Just brings in a big old pile of rock and just lets her sit. You know? Oh. But I have been, I've been in this struggle, but God's teaching me through this struggle. That's what I'm getting after here. And so, some of your greatest accomplishments that you're going to have is when God challenges you with the struggle. Because oftentimes, we're too hard-headed to get it the first time, and so He's got to push us into a struggle. He's got to give us some pressure. Some pressure. Because we often say, oh, I can't do that. Oh, I can't do that. Oh, that's not me. Oh, I can't do that. But we find out when we get some pressure put on us that we can actually do that. We can actually accomplish this. You know, Brother Brandon, when you were taking over that new job over there, I can imagine the devil whispering in your ear, oh, you'll never be able to. Oh, you're juggling this and the Air Force? Come on. Really? You'll never learn that computer system. Oh, you get what I'm saying? You'll never get this schedule down. How will you get that? But pressure. And now, piece of cake walking in, right? You probably got it ironed out pretty well. I mean, you're dealing with humans, so you're going to have your certain situations, but yet here you are. And we can all identify with this. We can all identify with areas where God has put pressure on our lives. But when that pressure happens, if you have that relationship, you see, you can go either or. Because the battle is in your mind, isn't it, Brother Joe? The battle is in your mind. What he said, I remember it. You can either go two ways. You can either believe the devil and go his route, and I have done that, or you can have that relationship with Jesus Christ and believe that He's going to see you through it. And I'm telling you, it's crazy things that you're going to be put into. And you know as well as I do, crazy stuff. You know, it may just be a situation where you've been placed at a table eating a meal with a bunch of secular individuals that don't believe in Jesus Christ. And you got to hold the line. Something simple like that. And I say simple, but put yourself there and think of how many times you may have caved. And you didn't necessarily, it didn't portray what Jesus Christ was wanting you to be there for to begin with. That light on the shining hill. Suddenly felt myself wanting to drape over because I was the outcast. Right? Drape over that light so I don't shine so bright. But they're going to know anyway. So when you get in that situation, just know they're going to know anyway. That Spirit's going to put it out, and they're going to know who you are if you have a relationship with Jesus Christ, right? So, moving on. What we find is that there's another place that'll keep that relationship strong, and that's our prayer life. Now, some of my greatest answers have been when I've just finally just really given in and got on my knees and cried out to God. I mean, I got a great answer just yesterday. I crawled on my knees and I asked God to take this pain from my kidneys. I anointed my kidneys with oil. I anointed my head, my eyes, my kidneys, everywhere that I was being attacked. I was just agreeing with the Word. I was agreeing with the Word. I believe it's in 1 Peter, where they anointed with oil and they prayed for the sick, healing for the sick. I said, Lord, I'm just agreeing with the Word, and I'm putting this on. And I'm telling you, Lord, I'm getting real. This is your blood, Jesus. That's where God's taken me to a personal relationship. More personal. He means more to me now than before, whenever I didn't have this at all. I didn't have this strife. I didn't have this struggle. So don't think that God's picking on you, per se, if you come into a trouble or come into some turmoil or you get some bad news. This could be one of your greatest things, and probably will be one of the greatest things that you have. That God, because the Lord doesn't want you strong. Watch this. Doesn't it say that He was powerful? What corrupted Him? That God made Him powerful. But when you're powerful, God can't be powerful. Because He says, when you are weak, that's when I am. You see how that works? So in your weakness, when you're a weak vessel, that's when God can come in like a flood, baby. He couldn't come in like a flood and tell Uzziah, stop! Stop right there. Hold on. Because Uzziah was too powerful. He didn't have a check and balance in his life. He couldn't hear God because his relationship had waned. Don't you think God talked to them in the Old Testament? Of course He did. Of course He did. It was just a different salvation. Right? But what we see is a man that got so powerful, all in himself, all into himself, where he couldn't obey God, where he couldn't obey Him, right? And so, all of his greatest accomplishments, we don't even talk about. When's the last time you talked about Uzziah? Even the people on there at his death, did they talk about his accomplishments? What did it say that they did? The man that was a leper. Oh, he's out to kill, steal, and destroy. He even took that legacy at the height of Judah. He took it to the height. Took it to the height. But all that power that he had just tore him down. And so, I just want you to know that a lot of your greatest accomplishments are going to be when you're at your weakest. When you're weak. And I'm going to close here with Isaiah 6, 1 through 8. Then I said, it's all over. I am doomed. For I am a sinful man. I have filthy lips,
and I live among a people with filthy lips. Yet I have seen the King, the Lord of the heaven's armies. Then one of the seraphim flew to me with a burning coal he had taken from the altar with a pair of tongs. And he touched my lips with it, and he said, "See, this coal has touched your lips. Now your guilt is removed, and your sins are forgiven." And then I heard the Lord asking, "Whom should I send a messenger to this people? Who will go before us?" And I said, "Here I am, Lord. Send me." You see, it's when we keep it in God's presence and we keep it personal. Because all the people that are personal in our lives, think about it, they're in our lives. All the people that are personal in our lives, we see them all the time. Think of somebody you haven't seen in a long time. Are they personal to you? That they live wherever. And you just, go over to their house unannounced. The closer the personal, the closer the relationship. And then the closer the relationship, the closer you're going to have an understanding of what that cross is all about. And that cross is actually going to be your Savior. It's not just salvation. It's going to be your Savior for a lot of things in your life that are going to try to come and destroy you. Because when we find out, when we get before the Lord and we get in His presence, look at how powerful we can become. We can be so dirty, but it doesn't matter. Did the Lord say, "Well, now hold on a second. We got to clean you up. We got to do some things here. Oh, look at this, look at this, and look at this." Is that what we see here in Isaiah? What do we see here? We see instant turnaround of a man's life. Instant turnaround. Because he's in His presence and in a relationship. That's what I see there. It just touched his lips. There wasn't no, okay, you got to get step 1, step 2, step 3 done here. I need at least 3 papers on how to love me. No. It's about His presence and His relationship with us and our relationship with Him. And He'll look over at that seraphim, and He'll fly over there and He'll grab a coal, and He'll come right down and He'll touch you. Because it said that He got it out of the coals, plural, didn't He? Is there more than one coal then? Or did Isaiah get the only one? He got the only coal? Who got the coal? But is there more? Isn't that what God can do? So when you make a mistake, just know that you can make that proper decision and get it right, or run into Him and get in His presence. Get in His presence and get your relationship right with Him. It may be a stone cold prayer, that first prayer. And you feel nothing at all. You feel like they're just bouncing right back and coming on
that back to you. But you keep praying. And that coal is going to touch your lip. Because we have Jesus Christ. Okay? Lord, I just thank you for this day. Lord, I thank you, God, for this this message. And Lord, I just pray, God, that it resonates with us, Lord. And Father, I pray that somehow brings change into our lives when the devil tries to strike us, Father. And Lord, I just pray, God, that you that your hand be upon the service today. Lord, let the praise and worship be powerful, I pray, God, because you're in this room. Lord, where 2 or 3 are gathered, there you are also. And Lord, I believe it. I believe it, Father. And I just pray, God, that your power and authority would live and reside in us. In Jesus Christ's name.